Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Previous Labor, I think he's a spokesman on aquaculture, pointed out that during the Labor administration, in fact, there had not been much growth in aquaculture in New Zealand. And talk about spin, Mr Speaker, because actually there was no growth whatsoever, absolutely none, zero. The Speaker himself realised that this was the second or third time round on the aquaculture industry legislation in New Zealand, but, Mr Speaker, not much growth coming from the previous Minister of such matters, when in fact there was zero growth. Interesting angle of spin, I think, there, Mr Speaker. Also, just very quickly, but other speakers have identified issues as to why there was no growth in aquaculture in New Zealand over the last 10 years or so, Mr Speaker. But interestingly, as other members have spoken, the committee operates very well. It's a bipartisan committee, and as you can see from the commentary, it's all very good. But a couple of this, what we're hearing on the other side is particular issues in and around changes, Minister's direction to coastal planning, existing consents, etc., Mr Speaker. And it is interesting because, in fact, these are main items in the bill, Mr Speaker. Coastal planning, the allocation of tools to manage demand, operating coastal permits, variation of coastal permits, and reconsenting of coastal permits for aquaculture, Mr Speaker. Yet the full committee actually voted for, has presented this bill to the House, and it has the endorsement of all parties across the House. So, OK, other members might want something to talk about, but actually if you read the commentary, Mr Speaker, if members read the commentary and go through some of the other papers around this bill, they will see actually they were not issues of concern enough to amend the original bill as intended across the committee, including members from the Labour Party. Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Honourable Steve Chadwick.
Yes, well, I rise to take a call in support of this bill, but we do have some reservations, and it was interesting to hear the member opposite because I was involved very closely with the Portakey District Council at the time when they too were trying to get consent to aquaculture space, and there was a bit of a gold rush on actually during the decade that we were in, or 9 years that we were in government, and it was unfettered access to the coastal margin, and that did cause us concern, and the member may laugh about the lack of progress, but I believe that this bill has just gone from one extreme to the other actually, and we were deeply concerned. Some aspects of our Labour bill, the Aquaculture Legislation Amendment Bill, were in this bill, but the crossover and the pick-up, as any government is entitled to, has given us concern. The industry isn't happy with the process for determining whether an aquaculture project would have undue adverse effects. The industry themselves. And the industry came to the Select Committee and they proposed a mechanism here where they'd work collectively here to look at any time looking at the undue adverse effects, put that test in during the consenting process, but no, Mr Speaker, this government knew best, and the industry thought they'd come up with an idea, and there's great collective intelligence there, but the government, in their wisdom, which of course they have the prerogative to do, just rejected that request from the industry, which I think is very indicative of why we're here in the House debating about the role of consenting authorities under the Resource Management Act, about the coastal policy statement, about coastal plans and the powers of consenting authorities, because actually in here we've got unfettered powers of the Minister yet again, very similar to what we've seen in Canterbury with the ECAN intervention there, and in Auckland as well. So again, we've got the Minister with powers here to override regional coastal plans. Regional coastal plans aren't an instrument developed overnight, as you know, Mr Speaker, and the Chair. They're developed after some time, and at times it is a lengthy process. But we've now got a Minister with the powers, and government is quite wrong to say those powers are controlled. They're unfettered powers here to override those consenting authorities. So it absolutely, arrogantly undermines those that have participated in the development of a regional coastal plan. And I have to say, as a previous Minister of Conservation, that I started to promulgate the coastal policy statement, and I have real concerns that the Minister, Kate Wilkinson, sat on that piece of work for 18 months, only ever released the coastal policy statement in this House because she was put under pressure by Labor. And it was Labor that started to ask the hard questions in the hard basket about what are you doing about the coastal policy statement. That was a guiding document for regional councils and local authorities, and the Minister herself delayed releasing that coastal policy statement. So why would the industry have faith in this government and the Minister at the time, who has the powers in this bill to completely override the regional planning around coastal activities? And I think it's a worry. So we've gone from one extreme, where there was a bit of a gold rush for coastal space, for aquaculture development, and yes, in Labor we too wanted to see that $1 billion unlocked, and that $1 billion potential earnings from aquaculture come back to flow into the coffers of New Zealand, but it hasn't yet. It still hasn't, and now we've given the powers to one minister to say that they can step in, override regional council, override other consenting authorities under the Resource Management Act, and I think that this bill is a reflection, having put their own flavour on it, Mr Chair, as they can, that it is also, given that power, has added uncertainty for investors in aquaculture space. So the very giving confidence to the industry that the Minister lauds in the House with this bill, now the industry themselves are saying, we actually don't know and we don't have confidence for investing in the long term for aquaculture and aquaculture development. So I think they've gone completely to the other extreme. It also ties the hand of councils in the consent process by requiring them to grant consents for a minimum term of 20 years. Now, when we look at developments in the coastal margin, and we're looking at Petrobras and their issue about access to mineral exploration, there are some real problems here. If a mineral exploration happens in Ngāti Porou's coastline, and they too are looking for consenting for aquaculture developments, what happens if there's an oil spill on those very fields of gold about aquacultural products? And I think when this bill gives the power for 20 years, we should be worried. Iwi should be worried. The Maori Party should be worried. They're fighting the good fight about Ngāti Porou and Petrobras and mineral exploration. Well, I would worry very much, actually, about the threat of contamination if there was an oil leak on the very aquacultural products that we see as gold. So, Mr Speaker, I've enjoyed taking a call in this bill. There are lots of aspects of this bill that we remain deeply concerned about, but because we too felt that there is great potential economically in aquaculture space, and I work with a Portakey, and they are ready to unlock some wonderful potentials over there in the coast in a community that's really struggling. We have some problems with this bill, and I suppose the test will be when we see application after application and the use of ministerial powers in this space. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Joe Goodhue.
Mr Speaker, I rise to take a brief call on the Aquaculture Legislation Amendment Bill, and I am pleased that both sides